All right, good evening. We'll go ahead and get started here. I don't really have a lot of content. I don't think I have anything particular to cover this week. I didn't get a whole ton of questions, and the ones I did get seemed to be sort of one-off things that I don't think were particularly conducive to covering with the group. So there's not too many people on here, so I'll still have people use the question interface, but I can unmute people if you have something you want to talk about and use the question interface to let me know, but I can unmute people if they've got things they want to talk about. Or if you just have a question to ask that works with the question interface, feel free to just type it in there. But I don't really have anything to cover tonight, I don't think. So there's a question here about posting the week 2 and 3 reports. Yeah, especially given that it seems like this call may be pretty short. I'll go do that right after this call. So there's a question about the new radios. I presume that's the OM5 PAC, and there's a note about seeing trouble with them in the home setup, but working fine on the field. I don't know exactly what issues you're seeing at home. We have, there are some reports of the latest firmware having some issues with ports appearing to be blocked in so the firmware that's with the 17.3 team update or team radio configuration having issues programming robots and some other things. I still haven't been able to track down exactly why that would be true. I have some pretty good details of I haven't tried to reproduce it. I guess I should put it that way as well. Partially because due to sort of update fatigue, we don't really want to push an update for it during the season when we're not seeing a problem with it at events, but it is on my list to try and get to before the season wraps up so that we can have something ready for teams. I do have a pretty good description of behavior from a few different folks, including one of the CSAs, Joe Ross, sent a pretty good description of what they were seeing specifically on 2.4 versus 5 when it was configured for both and things like that, that I'm hoping when I do get a chance to go test it will help me chase down what might be going on. But I haven't had a chance to really dive in and take a look at it yet. I don't understand from the way it's configured why that would be happening, but there have been enough reports of it that it definitely is doing some different things. Other than that, there is sort of I'll describe it as flaky behavior of the second Ethernet port on the OM5 PAC. I am testing a thing or two with regards to that as well. It doesn't consistently, I can get it to fail here in the way that it seems to fail in the field, but it doesn't seem to happen very consistently for me, so it's difficult to test fixes without just power cycling the radio a whole ton of times and sort of counting the number of times until it fails and seeing if I can get substantially higher than that. So I'm in the process of testing a fix for that. I did get a little sidetracked on it. I was testing that towards the end of last week. But that's a difficult issue to reproduce reliably as well and see if we can resolve. And we did make the team update fix to allow teams to use switches on the one port that we haven't seen issues with. There's a question here about the new for 2017 folder on the Schoology page being empty. And does that mean that there's nothing new? So there were some changes. The way the third-party libraries were broken out it was one change this year, and some stuff with the camera server was another change. I may go ahead and put something in there even this late in the season on some stuff about the LabVIEW camera server, because it seems like that's been the one that people are having more trouble with. I didn't really have a ton of material to be able to put into any sort of debugging thing for the C++ and Java camera server, and I didn't really before the season have a whole lot to put in the LabVIEW one as well. We didn't really know what the failure modes were going to be and what they looked like. I had intended to put some content in there about the way the third-party libraries work, but unless there are issues that I haven't been hearing about, it hasn't seemed like there's really been a whole lot of issues with that at events that the CSAs are running into. So if people really want something to be posted there about the third-party libraries that goes into any more depth than what's on Screen Steps, which does pretty much describe the mechanism and how it works, let me know, and I can try and find some time to put something up there. But it sounds like either what's on Screen Steps is sufficient or people aren't really running into issues with it. There's a question here about having a Talon SRX dying and taking down the entire CAN bus, and whether there's any trick technique to troubleshooting the bus other than isolating device or removing a device and adding them back one by one, or this isn't in the question, but the similar approach would be pulling out devices one at a time, like jumpering around devices. If it's, quote, taking down the whole bus and that nothing really works with that device on the bus, that's really all you're going to be able to do. You're not going to be able to tell what's causing it, short of having like some other low-level bus reader and the ability to interpret what's coming off of it. If the talons themselves are in like the blinking red state where they're not detecting the presence of the CAN bus, you're not going to be able to get a whole lot more out of it than that. If they are showing the presence of the CAN bus, but it just seems bogged down or something like that, you're seeing 100% usage or devices aren't working quite right, you may be able to pull up the RoboRio webpage and see if one of the devices is missing or things like that. But I think either removing all the devices and adding them back one by one, or I think jumping around devices one by one may be potentially slightly more effective approach, but it depends on how many devices and how the wiring works and things like that. I know when my team was having an issue with the CAN bus a couple weekends ago, we basically had to do that. Was like we were bisecting the bus basically. We cut it in half and went to the PDP jumper from the first half of the devices, and that seemed to work. And then we added a few more devices and it seemed to fail, and we were sort of doing a binary search for the part of the bus that was causing the problem, which ended up being the last run between the PCM and the PDP. So there's a question here. The RoboRio is quite tolerant of shorts on pins. Is it less tolerant of shorts on the pins in the MXP connector? Not that I'm aware of, but I can ask some folks and find out. My understanding was that that connector would have the same protections on the pins as the regular like PWM and DIO, because it's pretty much equally exposed if there's no MXP device installed as the other pins are. Anything else? Did I record the previous webinars? So the previous follow-up calls are recorded. They're in Schoology, in the Schoology course. I'm pulling it up, and then I'll show my screen to show where they're at. All right, I think that's showing the right screen here. With the Schoology course here, I'm clicked on materials. If you click on this follow-up calls item, they're embedded here, and then you could, it's the YouTube player. You could click on watch on YouTube if you want to be able to have a little more control over full screening or whatever to see some of the on-screen content. And there's the other part of that question was, were any of them especially useful? So it's talking about both answering questions that I got from folks that were at week 1 and 2 events, and also talking specifically about some of the LabVIEW USB camera stuff, showing where in the dashboard you should look to see the stream URLs, and some things like that about the LabVIEW dashboard camera issue. So the follow-up on the short says, it saw a team lose all sensor readings when there were pieces of aluminum in the MXP connector that seemed to take down all of the DIO and analog in. That's exactly what I would expect. And that will happen if you short across the DIO pins as well. The RoboRio shouldn't suffer damage, but I would expect that if the 5-volt rail or 3.3 rail, depending on how their RoboRio is configured. But if the DIO rail, the power rail, was shorted, I would expect that the RoboRio power light should be red. You should see, we'll open up the driver station here. In the driver station power tab, it should show which rail is shorted, but that could occur on either the DIO or the MXP, and I would expect it to take out any sensors that are using that rail for power. The reading, the signals themselves, if you were actually providing the signals, I believe should still work. Like if you were to apply 5 volts to one of the signal pins, I believe it should still read okay. But it's just unlikely that the sensors were actually doing that if they were powered off of the rail that was shorted. So this is the driver station power tab where I would expect to have seen like a 5-volt short here. But because it's all the same rail, there's no indicator of whether it's the MXP or the DIO or other places that the 5-volt pins are exposed, the analog, or other places that the 5-volt rail is exposed. It should show a count here, probably 1 if it just shorts and stays shorted. I don't think this continues to increment. I think this is unique faults. So the question was, what would it show in the driver station? I think on this power tab, the short would show 5-volt 1. So these are the 3 different rails on the RoboRio. And so I would expect to see a 5-volt short show up here. 6-volt short is short of the power on the PWM, which is used for servos, but is not actually needed for the PWM motor controllers. And 3.3 volt is exposed on some of the buses like I2C and things like that, or on the DIO if you go into the RoboRio and change the jumper. But for most teams, this would be like the pins near the I2C header, I think the SPI header. I'm trying to look at the RoboRio that's on my desk here. Oh, which has a gyro plugged into it. Oh, there's the pinout. Yeah. So it's exposed on the SPI header and things like that. Is it shown on the RoboRio webpage? Nope. Unfortunately, I don't believe that this information is available on the RoboRio webpage, just in the driver station. Circling back to CAN Talons, says one robot with all Talon SRXs blinking red. User's guide says that's a PWM calibration failure. It should also say that that is a CAN bus not detected as well. Teams seem to be running fine despite the blinking red lights. That's very confusing. There's a couple possible cases of blinking red lights. Where am I trying to go? I am trying to go to screen steps. And status light quick reference. Spark, Talon, Victor. Here we go. So blink codes during calibration, blinking red is a failed calibration, but you also see blinking red here as a reverse throttle. So it's possible that all of their Talons were running in reverse. But if you saw this while the robot was disabled, with the LEDs alternating red, then that should be either fault detected or CAN bus not detected. So if they were running fine like that, that is a little confusing to me. If they had them all wired as PWM, it probably blinks this way until the code instantiates them. Like when the robot's disabled, they probably blink like that. And then they'd be solid orange when the robot is enabled, if there are a bunch of Talon XRXs wired to PWM. But if they're wired on the CAN bus, team was using CAN bus, not PWM. So if the team was using CAN bus, their Talons should not be blinking red. They should be blinking orange, especially if the robot was disabled. If it's enabled, that means they were all trying to run, or that they've hit a limit switch here. So if the team was running fine and didn't want to fix anything, that is really confusing to me, but I could see not doing anything about it. You could look here on the CAN bus metrics here to see if they were seeing a lot of CAN bus errors. And it would be, I guess what I would do would be to try and troubleshoot the CAN bus wiring, see if jiggling certain wires causes them to go from blinking red to blinking orange. Like I said, my team ran into this issue with our practice robot a couple weeks ago, and it turned out that one particular run that ran underneath everything was getting tugged this way and that, and was causing an issue. And so we ended up eventually tracking it down to that by, jumping over each device or groups of devices and sort of cutting the bus in half at some times, and tracked it down to which runs were doing it and rewired them, and that resolved the issue. There is not a spare parts inventory posted right now. I'll bug JB. I bugged him last week. I'll bug him again about trying to get one for info on what he cares about in spare parts for you guys to check out. What happens if you short the rails on the VRM? If one of the 5-volt 500 milliamps is shorted, does that kill the other? Yes. So the VRM rail labelings, like there is one 5-volt 500 milliamp rail. So that has 500 milliamps to across all, like both pairs of terminals added together are limited to 500 milliamps. So it's not two separate 500 milliamp supplies. It's not two separate 2 amp supplies. Shorting the 500 milliamp shouldn't take out the 2 amp side. Basically, the 500 milliamp are behind an additional PTC. So shorting the 500 milliamp shouldn't take out the 2 amp. I believe shorting the 2 amp does take out the 500 milliamp. And then removing the short, the green light indicator should come back on. But there are some people have seen, especially I believe I saw Across the Road mention that newer revisions of the VRM address this, but certainly with the original VRMs, and I don't know exactly when the switch was made, there are short circuit. It will usually protect itself and not damage the VRM, but somewhere in between, like if you try and draw 2.5 amps or something like that, I believe it's possible to damage the regulator inside the VRM by doing that. There's a question here about adding USB Ethernet to spare parts. For the most part, spare parts is pretty much populated with leftover inventory from kitting. I can check. I do understand the utility of having that, especially now that the rookie laptops required a USB Ethernet. You know, they didn't have a hardware Ethernet port. So I'll check again with the Kiddo Parts team, but I'm not going to make any promises there. Yeah, there's another note here about Ethernet ports getting a lot of abuse with tethering. Yeah, I certainly recommend that teams, use a pigtail on both ends of the connection from tethering to various robots. The Ethernet port on my work laptop is now does not seat reliably. It still functions, but it's certainly on the hairy edge from tethering to robots over the years, and I don't even tether all that much compared to what teams do with their driver stations. So Ethernet pigtails on the Robo Rio side and on the laptop side are certainly helpful things to have to avoid that type of issue. Anything else? All right, I'll go get this recording posted, and I'll go get the week 2 and 3 CSA reports posted next, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. We'll see how long it takes me to do it, but I'm going to hop on that right now to try and get those up on the, I guess while I'm here sharing my screen, we'll hop back to the Schoology page just to show people where those are if there's anybody on the call that doesn't know how those show up. So this CSA reports, this is where you can go to submit them, but it also shows them all here as attachments. So I'll go grab the week 2 and 3 ones and get them posted so that they show up here as well. All right, thanks for joining, and everybody, good luck as we head into, what are we on, week 4? Yeah, week 4 events. Have a good night.